Hungary and Slovakia have asked the EU to mediate with Ukraine after Kyiv placed Russian group Lukoil on a sanctions list. Both countries, which have pro-Moscow ties, said last week that they were no longer receiving oil from Russia as a result. The European Commission says it's looking into the request. If the mediation doesn't yield results, the case could be taken to an international court. Hungary receives about a third of its total oil imports from Lukoil. And I want to talk about all of this with Chipanda Chimbelu from DW Business here with me in the studio now. Hi, Chipanda.
Hi.
This might be surprising to hear for some who are watching. Can you explain what exactly is going on here, why we've seen Hungary and Slovakia take this step?
Well, you're right. It is totally surprising. You would think that at this point in the war, you wouldn't have energy exports from Russia going through Ukraine, but that is the case. There are carve-outs, there are exceptions in the sanctions, and those exceptions also apply to Hungary and Slovakia in this case. And Hungary actually relies on 70% of its crude exports come from Russia. So that is a huge amount, and Lukoil accounts for about half of that. So this is why this is a big deal for Hungary, because of course it's quite a big chunk of its crude needs. And in terms of Slovakia, the biggest refinery in the country, the major refinery in the country, relies on Lukoil primarily for its crude supplies. And so that's the reason we're seeing these two countries take this measure, obviously, because those carve-outs were negotiated with the EU, but Kyiv has obviously, gone against those negotiations, and that's what they are hoping to get the EU to put pressure on Kyiv to maybe backtrack on that.
Wow, it's really fascinating. What does this tell us about the wider picture here? Does this mean that EU countries are failing to reduce their dependence on Russian energy exports?
Well, it is one of those questions that you would answer with a yes and a no, because of course there are countries that have managed to do that. Germany has managed to pretty much find alternatives to liquefied natural gas from Russia. Bulgaria is another good example, which also had a carve-out. It managed to find alternatives to crude exports from Russia and replace them with supplies from Kazakhstan to 0%. So, and that hasn't happened with Slovakia and Hungary because those two countries have these carve-outs. So when countries are not forced to make changes, then they don't actually have the political will. There could be another argument here. Of course, those two countries are also the two countries that are more pro-Russian, in the EU. And of course, maybe the actions of Kyiv could also be seen as an attempt to maybe put those countries in a certain corner. So it will be interesting to watch how this plays out politically as well, because of course, it's not just about the business of oil and energy as well. It's really also about the politics behind this.
Absolutely fascinating dynamics there. Thank you for bringing us up to speed. That is Chipanda Chimbelu from DW Business. Appreciate your insights.